And there were a couple of issues that I took an interest in, which I hope to talk a little bit about today. And I'm also looking forward to joining the Armed Forces community in Liverpool on Saturday as well, Madam Chair. To start with New Clause 4. New Clause 4 seeks to right an historical wrong. 21 years ago, the ban on homosexuality, on LGBT plus personnel serving in the armed forces was lifted. That ban inflicted staggering cruelty on those men and some women who had stepped forward to serve their country. Between the mid-1950s and 1996, men of our armed forces who were thought to be gay were arrested, searched and questioned by officers trained for wartime interrogation. In many cases, this went on for days before they were charged, often without legal counsel or support. And on many occasions, arrest was based on little evidence. Heterosexual men were falsely accused by service police officers, losing careers and in some cases, homes and families. And after harrowing investigations, these men were led away to military hospitals where they were subjected to degrading and shameful medical inspections, conducted in accordance with confidential Defence Council instructions held by every unit of the armed forces. At court-martial, in the moments before those convicted were sent down, operational medals and good conduct badges were ripped from their uniforms. They typically served 6 months in prison for the military criminal offence of being homosexual. And it's staggering that this continued until 1996 and that the administrative dismissal of LGBT plus personnel continued for a further 4 years until January 2000. As these members of the armed forces walked from prison, they were dismissed in disgrace with criminal records as sex offenders which from 1967 had no civilian equivalent. As they left through the main gate, they were commonly given letters instructing them to never again use their military ranks or wear items of uniform, for example, in remembrance at the cenotaph. And they continued to obey those letters. Their names were erased from the retired lists of the Army, Royal Navy and Royal Air Force as though they had never existed. They were cast out of the armed forces family, outed to their own family and friends. They lost homes and they lost their financial stability. Their service record cards had the top corner clipped and were marked in red pen with the annotation "dismissed in disgrace," causing many a lifetime of employment issues. And in the past, in their moments of need, they were shunned by military charities, something that has now changed. However, there's been no such remedy from government or the Ministry of Defence. The committee heard it first hand from a charity fighting with pride, and I believe the Minister has met with them. Accounts of those affected and how they live today amidst the ashes of their former service careers. LGBT veterans are scattered across the United Kingdom, often away from military communities, living lives starkly different to those they'd hoped for when they joined the forces. And in the 21 years since the ban was lifted, nothing has been done to support these individuals. As Canada, Germany and the United States and other nations prepare, assess, make reparations and put right this shameful wrong, it's long overdue for the United Kingdom, which persisted with the ban for longer and implemented it more zealously than many others, to do the same. These men and women deserve an apology on behalf of the nation from the Prime Minister in Parliament. They must be supported on the pathway to royal pardons, restored to the retired list and have their medals returned. Prohibitions on their use of rank and wearing of berets at the cenotaph must be revoked. They need resettlement support, which we offer to all of the members of the armed forces, and they must be fairly compensated and have their pensions reviewed in recognition of their service and the hardships they faced then and now. Until that is done, this will remain a matter of national disgrace, and it will stand in the way of this government's stated wish to be a global exemplar for both LGBT+ and veterans communities. And so, this new clause places a duty on the Minister of Defence to find out where those veterans are, find how they fared, and make recommendations to Parliament about what must be done to right this wrong. I also want to touch on new clause 6, my own new clause, which touches on issues around addiction treatment and puts a duty of care on the Secretary of State. We heard just this week, reported in the Daily Mirror, that over 8,000 UK troops had needed medical support for alcohol in the past 6 years. And I want to also thank the member for Wolverhampton South West. Every time I've heard him talk so openly, I know that it will help so many other people who listen to him. We know that rates of addiction in the armed forces population are much higher than those in the general UK population. The unique demands of military life, the serious trauma, violence and loss make it no surprise. The culture, and I say this without judgment, where harmful drinking rates are considered normal, where vulnerability is a weakness and seeking help is seen as failing to meet the demands of service, makes treatment and recovery even harder. And too many veterans end up in mental health crisis, homeless, in prison or committing suicide. The charity We Are With You provides specialist services for veterans through their Right Turn programme. The majority enrolled in their programmes are those who left service many, many years earlier, which begs the question for the government, what more can be done to increase early intervention? For many people, asking for help with alcohol and drug use, however necessary, is incredibly difficult. Denial, fear, pride and shame stop people seeking the specialist support they need. And it's no different for our service personnel, veterans and their families. If anything, these barriers are all the more difficult to overcome. And having met with ADFAM, a charity that supports family members of those with substance use problems, we discussed their 2020 research report in collaboration with the University of York and funded by the Forces in Mind Trust. Families shared the impact of the heavy drinking culture in the armed forces, with many describing the use of alcohol as frequent, heavy, expected, normalised, and used as part of and in response to all situations and occasions. This normalisation means that problems with excessive drinking are not seen as problems. Aside from the heavy drinking culture, these families shared their experiences of another culture, a culture of silence. Families say their loved ones were expected to be stoic, to be strong and infallible. Veterans and their families are too often left feeling further isolated and vulnerable. There are a small number of charities who provide specialist support for these veterans and their families. Tom Harrison House in Anfield, around the corner from my own office, is the only residential veteran-specific treatment centre in the UK. And I've got to know veterans there, heard their experiences and their struggle to get the support and understanding they need. Many with co-occurring mental health diagnoses, complex needs and struggling with addiction for many years. And I've not met one person there who's told me that the support they got into came with any help from the armed forces. One veteran told me, from the army, I went straight to prison and did a long spell there. I went home for a year and I lived on the streets for 12 years. During that time, I was using drugs, drinking, and I couldn't stop drinking and became an alcoholic. Another veteran told me, I gave my life to service. I was trained to lack empathy, conditioned to survive. Asking for help was a weakness, encouraged to drink, and when there was nothing left for me to give, I was discharged, without any reconditioning, no support, completely alone. Peer support is key in addiction treatment and to the success of Tom Harrison House, and veteran-specific services are having great successes. Yes, I will.
I thank the honourable member for his kind words earlier, and I want to stand with him about Tom Harrison House. One of my friends who I served with was literally on death's door, and they've saved his life, and now he's helping other people with addictions and problems that he went through. So credit to having them in your constituency. They're an amazing organisation.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm really delighted to hear that. And I'm grateful for him taking the effort to let us know in the House here. Armed Forces charities provide life-serving, changing services, particularly with substance abuse problems, but access remains a postcode lottery. And what I think is wrong is that the state takes such little responsibility for ensuring veterans receive the treatment they need, and requiring public bodies to give due regard to the principles of the Covenant isn't enough. This bill was an opportunity to set measurable national standards that would end the current postcode lottery through the Armed Forces Covenant. Once personnel have left service, they rely on NHS and local authorities, and of course the UK's third sector organisations who provide excellent help and support. Their work's fantastic, but the MOD has a responsibility to those men and women that it has shirked for too long. For too many veterans, their service to this country has come at a devastating cost. Drink and drugs are often only an escape, a way to cope, a way to manage or medicate mental health conditions and past trauma. One of the worst failings of the system is that many drug and alcohol services simply don't have the competencies to deal with mental health issues in-house, and many mental health services aren't able to offer support if a patient presents with substance use disorders. Being bounced between services effectively prolongs people's suffering for longer and longer.
Will you give way?
I will.
Madam Chair, thank you. I listened with interest to what my friend is talking about in terms of veterans. I want to make 2 points if I can. Firstly, of course, not all veterans are mad, bad or sad. The picture you're painting is very negative. The vast majority of veterans in this country live very successfully and very happily, fulfilling lives. And my second point is this. I visited Veterans Aid yesterday in London, a very impressive organisation, where that particular charity is focused very much not on alleviating symptoms, but on outcomes. Do you agree that outcomes is the right way to go?
It's a gentle reminder that we speak through the chair rather than directly. Dan Carden.
Madam Chair, and I take the honourable member's second point, but I wouldn't want to be painting a negative picture whatsoever. I am speaking on behalf of the people I've met in my constituency who have come through Tom Harrison House and elsewhere, who have suffered a great deal in their lives. And I'm going to finish on some points that Dame Carol Black made in her independent review of drugs at Phase 1, where she says the number of residential rehabilitation services has reduced significantly, removing a core treatment component for those that need support in recovery, and that some areas are starting to ration treatment, setting higher thresholds for those who can access it, or just offering a minimum service due to workers having such large caseloads. And I think the question for the government is, if mental health services are failing the general population, what use is a law that gives service personnel and veterans due regard? Regardless of your training or your dedication to your duty, mental health disorders, including addiction, do not discriminate. And I, Madam Chair, simply want the MOD to take greater responsibility and interest in these issues. Thank you.